Hello, everybody. As folks start to file in, we'll let them file in to be here among the screens and squares and cubes with us. Hi, Maureen. Welcome to the latest Wednesday afternoon poetry reading as part of the new social environment series. This is the 700,000th installment of the NSE and the 300,000th Wednesday afternoon poetry reading. I'm Anselm Berrigan, the poetry editor for The Rail. And today our reading has been put together by Charles Theonia, who will read along with Nazareth Hassan, Derica Shields, Sogumi, and Nora Treatbaby. I will introduce Charles in a minute, who will read first, followed by Derica, then Oki, then Nora, then Nazareth, to round it out. As with the as these readings go, please take a look at the chat as we're moving along. There'll be information about the works of each reader dropped in there, as well as concerns related to the Rail in general. And let's see, what else needs to be said? It's late April in New York City at 1:03 p.m. It still feels like March. And yet somehow life continues. I'm very happy to have Charles curating this reading and reading. Thank you, Charles, for putting this terrific lineup together. Charles Theonia is a poet, teacher, enthusiast, and transsexual without direction. They are the author of the artist book Saw Palmettos, which was published in 2018 by Container Press, and the chapbook Which One is the Bridge, published by Topside Press. Please welcome Charles to the Rail reading.
Thank you, Anselm. I love this reading series, and I'm very happy to have this chance to get these writers together. One of whom I'm meeting today, one of whom I've emailed before, and some who are my friends. So I'm just really, I'm very excited to hear what's coming. And I'm also excited to be their opening act. So I'm going to put a doc in the chat in case anyone likes to read along while people are reading. And I'm going to start with a poem that was in the Rail in the Flaw. Mouth Weather, Renee Gladman. I wake up unwilling with a dog on my neck. Everything moving, sluggish, molecular, cold. The kitchen table is a desk, so I don't have to step from the stream of your commentary or the walls heating up in morning's directions. A dog is about bringing the outside in while there is still an outside. The tension alters the temperature, movement on the level of vibration. Slight openings to press a cheek to and express the workday pores. Approach is a sensation. We're heading in non-parallel directions, leaving touch on the table. I invite you into the space of my body for study, discovering operations of nearness and the adapter I need to interface with your inner delight. Everything on the table helps me reach for it. A chihuahua sleeps for 18 hours a day. I extend our bubble with a tongue, and snowfall begins, leaving work obsolete. I like it when you tell me where your mouth has been. Begin can be replaced with any word that brings you closer. Light study in one breath. Overhead lighting is abusive, says our diva Mariah. And when she sings, I get kind of hectic inside. Don't you feel expanse and containment leave her open the moment before? Groping in its absence, at some point, I forgot the room was still there when I wasn't. underlit by screens, seeing in from streets' rosy bricks to neighbor cat, golden in their fish tank. Modernist chandeliers of midwinter, the least day. Then it's all downhill from here until it isn't. We like this shapeless season. Let's us be shapeless too. Trish says that she is transsexual, of course, lets them know they are women and men. I'm she in pink earbuds and Sir without. Chalcedonies glow on hands with their own light. And what about that private sensation of purpose? Walking up block, thrumming, bulbs about to pop, street lights flicker, and most everyone wants to be reflected back in sweet, sweet fantasy, the one thing I'm good at. I'm gonna read a couple poems from a series that takes language from a sexological study about trans kids, pretty gross, and intervenes in it with language from texts by artists and writers, pretty great, to see what happens. So this first one is using language from Trish Sala's lyric sexology, and it's called Clinical Curiosity. And I would say this one goes out to anybody who has run into somebody who ghosted them at the queer health clinic. Maybe not just me, maybe just me. Clinical curiosity. Before my wanting to be me on you perks up, lust soaks the improbable space it happens across. I look to you one chair over in the gender clinic, deliquescing with me in the nonprofit heat, where unbelievably, I've never had a crush on a single overworked nurse practitioner, even the time they sloshed my own blood all over me. But how have you been in the continual girl fight? I'd lost track, and now they're handing me a cup into which I'll go maneuver my evidentiary piss. Goodbye, I'll be at the beach tomorrow, if you'd like to liquefy me there as well. My kingdom for another chance to enter the weather system of our cover up in sweat. This is why I love waiting rooms. There's still a chance I could get better. We couldn't encrust life with love, from Amy Silman's Notes on Awkwardness. The body turns out to be a metabolism, a place where questions are fleshy, digested. Substance looks restless in your ill-fitting, uncool girl machine. While we busy ourselves trying to girl in fits and starts, there turns out to be something stuck in your procedures. Shit takes place, a living weight smeared between your teeth, churning out beauty too moist, substantial, too real. We didn't know what real was. Ugly, on the other hand, does its own thing. Intimate, uncomfortable, funny, poised in your nostril, conditioned for making a painting. Trying to embarrass the uncertain extent to which material gropes for form, an open fly. You look down at your creation and blurt, my God, you're me. And last one. If you squint with your ears, Beverly Glenn Copeland. Placelessness undoes itself in dust. Distance between you and you may bruise to the degree we don't give up looking. And an anyhow occurrence offers surface for thought. Put a feeling down and look at it from across the room. The keyboard is a life form, and we're doing at least a little bit more loving than they prognosticated for our emotional disorder. You can't become on your own. That's an open inventory of I haven't lost it yet, or I think I know where I left it. Looking for the next pebble forever. At this point, I've lived many indoor hours in the restorative company of Beverly Glenn Copeland. Where he flutters, listening moments propagate. One thought, brightly colored, attracts others to spread its pollen. It's a feeling I know to be false, that everyone else is outdoors in the sun. If form is forever, it will have to fall apart over and over again. I want to admit the earnestness of this last year at his electronic garden. It makes me feel wide enough to know everybody is no accident. It's as close to a universal broadcast, just like together is optional. Won't you look for it? That's it for me, and I am excited to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Our next reader is going to be Derica Shields, who is from South London. A Heavy Nonpresence, her oral history project on Black Londoners' accounts of the British welfare state, was published by Triple Canopy last year. Derica is currently working on Bad Practice, a book about the potentials of Black failure, forthcoming from Bookworks. And you can find out more about her work at her website, dericashields.com. Please welcome Derica to the rail.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. I wasn't anticipating being here today, so it's great to be able to be here. Thank you to Charles for inviting me, and to everyone at Book and Rail and everyone here today. That was such a beautiful reading. Yeah, thank you, Charles. I'll start by reading a fragment from Bad Practice, which is pretty much a book of fragments with some with a couple of like essays and fake transcripts of lectures that have never been given. And this is fragment 3, or Hype on a Fantasy of Upward Mobility. Somewhere along the line, I had decided that something wasn't enough of a something for me. I wanted a heap of sugar in my bowl. I wanted to smash the bowl and have my hands drip crystal. Farewell, survival. Ben Carson is thinking big at my door, a bouquet of Black excellence in hand. At the university, you can study how to make a dichotomy of what cannot be split, lashing words like constitutive and imbricated across English-made chasms. I buy hiking boots. My sister says, we've lost her. I had survived childhood, and now I wanted to mount a funicular for a breathtaking view. In The Wretched of the Earth, where Frantz Fanon teaches us to recognize ourselves, he writes of the muscular dreams of the bridled colonial non-subject that take on the contours of our own oppression. Sylvia Wynter, in an interview with Greg Thomas, says, "You see, I think one of the most difficult classes to come to terms with in modern society is the class from which we come from, which is what they call the lower middle class. Notice people like Hitler. You cannot understand Hitler or Stalin except knowing that they come from that stratum. It's a very difficult stratum. You are always wanting to be that normative middle class, and you're terrified of falling into the negation of non-middle classness. It seems to me a lot of work has to be done about the temptations of that class, and they are temptations that we experience. How does one escape it? There is an almost fascist temptation. You've done everything so correctly. You've got opportunities, but they're cramped. So you could see this in a Thatcher. She used to live above the store, her father's grocery, and you see this in a Condoleezza, a rigidity. Even the hair is rigid. You sit back and you say, this is how they're used against the others. And yet I don't want to pour everything on her, you understand? I'm just profoundly sad in a way. The anonymous damned of Lessons from the Damned say, last night, I went to look something up in a book, the part about self-cultivation. Every time I open this book, it opens up to a certain page. It always opens to a page about how the bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie always talk out of their own class interests. It's underlined in black pen. And when I opened the book, I said, this is an indictment. So the next thing I'll read was written very recently. It's a work in progress. I've basically been spending time in this extremely strange garden that's not too far from where I live. And I live in Croydon, which is like an outer borough of South London, where a lot of African and Caribbean people live, having been gentrified out of more central London boroughs like Southwark, Lambeth, and Lewisham. So I've just been trying to like understand this place and walk it and be in it. And there have been some surprising things like this weird garden. The gate opened into a walled garden, and the garden was a museum of living trees. Manna ash from Mexico, redwood from California, ironwood from Iran, ginkgo from China, monkey puzzle from southern Chile. So said the placards sentineled by each tree. They were planted in the early 1900s by an English hoarder marauder who traveled the Americas, Asia, Africa, collecting seeds and saplings that he hoped to cultivate in Croydon's chalky soil. What makes a man imagine he should move the earth's beings around, and why does he go about doing so? So many of us have been forced to surrender to this European vision of an owned world. In the walled garden, it is possible to learn about the construction of nature through time, that natural is a resource that exists for human plunder pleasure, which is not the pleasure of existing in the rhythm of swell and ebb. In the walled garden are the representatives of the world's great trees, the talented 10th of trees, rare trees, curiosities, the trees that presumably all Eric Wetton's haters told him could never be grown in Britain. Encircling Wetton's accomplishments are houses with property prices boosted by their exotic treetop views. I am awed and sorry to see the blue cedar planted here in 1922, a century ago, its green-gray sprays twitching with tit and sparrow flight. The blue cedar, a tree Wetton took from the mountains of Morocco and Algeria, has grown so tall that you can only see its top once on the other side of the garden. I note where these trees have broken their appointed bounds. The placard beside the Osage tree, planted here in 1925, does not mention the Osage people of the American Midwest, who were living at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers around the time that they introduced the Osage tree to a Scottish explorer marauder. The placard does say that in 1996, this Osage tree fruited, despite having none of the conditions necessary to do so. Maybe because I too was born here, I have an impulse to make those splaying roots, that rogue fruiting, mean something about tenacity or persistence. But that impulse is also part of the 500-year problem, all the meanings the human imposes on other life forms, which it then boils down to usefulness, monocultures into obsolescence, or stranger yet, preserves amid generalized expendability. To undo a garden that is a colonial museum, spit out these dispassionate reports of plunder as scientific botanical knowledge-making, arc for another relation. Since certain plants and animals depended on us not to cut down certain old trees, even if they were in the middle of farmland, we obliged them and taught our descendants not to cut them either by handing down tales about fairy, demon, spirit inhabitants. In that way, we became part of an ecosystem that survived after we had moved on to other pastures. And then finally, this is something that I've been reading and kind of riffing on for like a year now. There's like one version of it in this poster behind me, and I keep just like moving the parts around. It's called Some Dreams at the moment. In the first phase of the dream, the European nations commit to paying reparations for between 16 to 20 generations, having finally realized that the longer they wait, the more expensive it gets. In the first act of the first phase of the dream, we do not live under the fallacy that people or land can be owned. We do not divide resources by borders or nations, and we have unbuilt the physical, legal, psychological empires that made ownership a possibility. In the first climax of the first act of the first phase of the dream, there is free and beautiful housing, there is delicious food and enough sex, and the earth moves and we move accordingly. Inheritance is a set of practices, ways of being, it is not property. In the first stirring of the first climax of the first act of the first phase of the dream, we are so cared for, and we issue each other prescriptions to go to the universities and cathedrals and smash or repurpose them. Other days we hold every object in every museum and see that it is returned to its people, to the ground, or to fire. In the forest of the dream, a creature hangs upside down in a clearing lit by early morning. I spray the feet, genitals, and head with kalanga water. An ecstatic end approaches. In the dream dreaming, we recall that all the phases happened at once. It looked like what we had learned to call chaos, but we were only getting free. Thank you.
Thank you, Derica. Thanks so much for that great reading. Now we're going to hear from Oki Sogumi, who first surfaced circa 1988 in Seoul, Korea, and has migrated to the US and currently lives in Philadelphia. Her writing dreams via friendship, speculation, communism, and squirmy life forms. Please welcome Oki to the Rail reading.
Hi, thank you, everyone. And it's such a treat to hear Charles and Derica, and I look forward to hearing Nora and Nazareth as well. I'm just gonna start. This poem's called Fatal Flaw. When asked directly about an emotional state, I resort to naming the objects, as if a specificity of technique or setting the scene is relaying against the thing you are asking. A couch that is also a bed, that is also a dining area, or the metal end of a fly swatter, or the exact location of an apartment in a metro area. Evidence bags rubbing away the core of the question. When entering the party's conversation, I can't seem to recall anything specific. Actors' names, make and model of your first car. I remember scenes of trees swooshing, like the rolling hair in a shampoo commercial, or hand gestures breaking apart the air. Bodies clown tumbling down miles of stairs. I can't conjure the right search terms to find the scene on YouTube. My memories start to conform to the shape of the scenes I can find on YouTube. Underneath are the scenes I couldn't find, and that overlay becomes mapped together. Meanwhile, I have left the party and forgotten how streets work. I run at a car and forget to apologize. Sir, I don't know your name. This is part of a series that I am starting to work on. On one hand, I had the pleasant bucolic childhood memory, often returned to, lying prone on a boulder, dappled sunlight, bird song, etc. I once asked a disturbed young man if he had such a place to hold in his mind, a moment's peace from his constant grasping questions, his parasitic and onerous relationship to other people's bodies, as if they belonged to him. But insecurely, like there was a lien on the property, before he denied having such a place, I imagined one for him. A dark creek bed with low slung foliage, the trickling water smelling slightly of nail polish remover, a tattered flag in the higher branches, patterned in just the same way as his aunt's apron. Not as it was, but as it was seen from the blown up angle of a child lying sideways on a cot next to a register and a fly strip. Yet on the other, let's say that these are the pebbles held in this hand, still warm and still cool to the touch. On one hand, I remain conscious of myself as an object of suspicion. Not myself exactly, but what might entering into a space lit in the underfoot signals, as if I was a secret carrier of contaminated capital, and now diseased, as well as faceless, soulless. I almost never lost this awareness, but I have hated this paranoid rendering, this American placement in the tangle of individuals. This is a longer poem called Their Gravity. They walked in tandem with colorless freeway trees, docile and licked down by rain, nearby the stutter of traffic, later recited like one smooth movement. Where there had been land a few years ago, there was only water or scorched earth or the small strip of wet trees by the remaining road. Water was everywhere and maps could not be used. There is this nation story they couldn't carry, a lone ranger on the plain of all felt things, as colonial as that, this carriage, this horse, this house on the hill. Instead, they kept count of the plastic wrappers that got stuck to their shoes, Doritos, Milky Way, Seokgang, peeled off with pocket knives. Instead, they carried forks, plates, spoons, cups and mugs, pots and pans, huge bowls and platters, latex or nitrile gloves, tongs, coolers, ice, lemons and limes, cooking oils, veggie broth, potatoes, rice, beans, lentils, salt and pepper, garlic, blankets, tarps, toilet paper, batteries, lights, flashing lights, candles, folding tables, buckets with lids, rain gear, garbage bags, dry, clean socks, oh so important, large plastic containers with lids, sunscreen, vinegar, gauze, bandages, herbal first aid, milk of magnesia, non-toxic paint, paintbrushes, cardboard/paper, wheat flour, newspaper magazines, markers/crayons, chalk, scissors. Sometimes they danced. Sometimes they recited this one mantra on loop. There is no gravity, the world sucks. There is no gravity, the world sucks. And if there is no gravity, the world sucks. And if there is no heaven, heavy with and sinking with beautiful fucks. And if there's no big cloud for any of us, sometimes they danced. They had a tendency to sparkle in the night when together, a tendency to put their hands out to see if others were still there. Hands out could also push hard. They didn't dream the one dream at night with God animals loping through, but somewhere between the affinity touch and the hard push, let's say the police are trying to seize the body of their friend, the one who was killed by a state agency, there would still be this touch between each other, knowing each was there to carry this body through, but also as a protective barrier against the police who would like to steal and destroy the evidence of their deeds. There is a space between what evidence is in different hands. There is a space between already gone and when there were these hands that had carried a friend, gripped at any dirt they could find to throw in caught faces, any loose garment, the reinforced edges of uniforms, as if to say, this is what can be carried. One evening, the shapes appeared on the horizon. Large tumbleweeds were stumbling towards them, coming closer. It was clear that they were animals with huge burrs and dried weeds somehow knotted into them and around them. They started to discuss how it was that these animals, which turned out to be sheep, had so much debris on their bodies. Finally, some insisted that they must all work on freeing the sheep from their burden first. As they all started undoing the plant material from the wool, it became clear that the sheep had been deliberately caged in these materials. Sticks were tied to other sticks and worked into the wool via interlaced thorns, like pins holding down fabric. And once the foundation was firm, material had simply been interwoven or stuck into the swirls of knotty stuff, like a demonic flower arrangement. And underneath this thicket, ropes knotted around their necks, and under the ropes were scars, marking the length of their captivity. It was good that they had worked on undoing the debris from the sheep before launching into speculation, they concluded. But were also miserable imagining the conditions which had entrapped the sheep in their thorny cages. I'm gonna stop reading from that poem for now. It's gonna end with this poem that is about summer, which I hope it will be soon. Turning. Slowly the leaves on the tree, quickly the leaves on the tree. Heat bearing drifts of pollen, the empty street at noon. Days of ambiguous storming mixed with leftover fireworks. It's the years people feel the least patriotic that you get the most fireworks. Whatever the theme or whoever officiates the daily atrocity, it's always the season of the scream. And our minor escapes pile up into just another heap in this weather. Form is not forever, all the ways to tie a scarf. A caved-in body bursting into smaller kin. And where the head should be, there's a cloud holding every conversation, once held at a whisper, getting louder and louder.
Thank you, Oki. Our next reader is going to be Nora Treatbaby. Nora Treatbaby's poetry has appeared in Efflux, the anthology We Want It All, and the Poetry Project's Recluse magazine. Her chapbook Hope is Weird was published by Other Weapons Distro in 2020. And she has a full-length book called Our Air, which is going to be coming out from Nightboat Books sometime in the near future. That was recently announced, so congrats, Nora, on that. And then the last sentence in the bio on the Brooklyn Rail page says, she does not spend her time. Please welcome Nora Treatbaby.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for asking me, Charles, and to the other readers. It's been really nice, and I'm excited to participate with you guys this afternoon. I'm going to read 19 short poems that kind of operate as the introduction to that book that's coming out. They're titleless, so I'll try to paste them. Nature is a pill. I was made to swallow it. Have I nothing to do with what's inside of me? Flesh is a full-on commitment, its invitation, a closed circle. If meaning is possible, it will occur on the surface. Where is touching? I made earth swallow it. Some woman weeps civically in accordance with her recycling. There is nowhere for any of it to go. What boundaries am I? A country doth sway in the long composition of the map, one fractal preceding the deep fake of design. I say call off the search and live in the splendor of the gerund. Self-dual, we are to be one figment repeating, yet at some depth, it wavers, laughs. Days filtered through the screen we use to resist them. What kind of loneliness compels us towards more of it? Leave me be to unsing the borders of the stream so I may wander away from this landscape which I share with 5G and the Arby's Stetson hat. Thence a purr of ancient truth. This cannot be permanent. Shape in lieu of the held breath of the wave and dissension towards the image of. What is? A framework, a curiosity system, a perfect replica of my butthole, as if we are not free to pursue thicker things, a life and its span, and measure what is the duty of the leaf. Cuneiform of the torso, when I think of my boobs, I become horny and sad, a creative space. Inscribed nothing and yet exists, my chest it is a creek bottom, home to a flow of meanings. Similar to the way light is migratory, arriving at the moment of appearance. They say somewhere in the city I am hidden and my task to find me. All signs point to other signs. Being a woman is an implausible dream. It is not something You become, are assigned, it is just an insane vibration. Is adequate life coming? Perfect carbless existence in this museum of breathing, just a tiny piece of substance, like belief. In exchange of signals, one thought follows the sound. Cannot discern the math of language underneath intent. The pronoun is a sculptural demon, freshly visualized human sexual value in each change. In order that we may know sex, sifting it, closing our eyes to the sound that is thrashing around the nipple. Observe how logic loves you. Good old-fashioned neutral observation rendering co-eval with rendering, placed in order to save life for a later date. Skin is not a hug. What really ends? You? The world demands you to imagine it. The situation goes on and on. It is impossible to survive duration, and yet acceptance floats into range. There not be a logo for life, so what of this stuff? Everything yet seen at one time bought. And purpose? The ancient umbel never faded into some billboard's shade. We were true, then and now. In fact, it is all yonder. I say, leave the space in space. You cannot rake the forest floor. I will advocate for progress when I am shown the substance it's composed of. I know a straight line can only ever be empty, from here to there, being everywhere. Wind deepens the hearing world, some rustling to remind life of life. I cannot be achieved. I am not a goal. I say give yourself when you have yourself, such as friendship, revolution, etc. Love is the porch upon which I sit and ponder the tree, its anti-noise which does not occur. Beauty is supposedly as a drop of dew, a collection of repeated elements dissipating into the dome. Whence does the rivulet enjoy the source of the arching cypress? Who knew 'twould fuck so? Lush columns of hellfire and the thinking that governs us. In bare light, in wooded, day-long glint, upwardly mobile in the persistent movement of structure. Each moment, there is no return, so we might need to just accept that. It is known, the future. Earth is dropping hints like, I'm real and love me. The mystery of freedom, who decided there was anything but, lofted into the flash, we are here to do what with time? Unpacked novel modes of existence, the skein of my life, a real thing to waste, dropped from the heights of the conceivable. Things are dangled into the weather, its limits, the world tries to end but cannot. Why? I need clues, not answers, something inside a big emptiness, like CVS or Sky. It is extremism to have an economy, society loaded like some spring, launching into the end of itself. Our aim is not to disperse things from their categories, but to dissolve the tenses from which arrangement is even possible. A blossom bloomed, the genius of relation is tendril between ache, feeling like a desert in one owns clothes. In spite of cliches of the multiple, one must ask, who is not coming through us? There is dignity in flickering like the passerine song between pines and being outside of reality's likelihood. Lost as I am in the specificity of air, I take breath and it is a fluency. I abandon my felicity with language for the dumbest shit truth and emit only the clean sound of sentiment. Light is a river. I am a flume. I am a line that receives heaven. All weather is near to me always. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. I think 19 poems is definitely the new land speed record for this series. Our final reader today is going to be Nazareth Hassan, who's a Brooklyn-based interdisciplinary artist working in writing, performance, music, sound, video, and photography. Please welcome Nazareth.
Hey y'all. So I'm gonna read 3 things today. One thing I wrote when I was falling asleep last night. One thing I wrote about a few months ago, and one thing I wrote about 3 years ago. So the first one I wrote last night, and it's called Organizing. They had somewhere to go. They had to go somewhere. Between the molded column du jour of light, the crux of its structural integrity, underneath homes and auto shops, lying fiddled by loose hair that moves at the speed of a howl, an absolute cry, a heroism so dulled into a holy encounter, deceptioning across make-believe graves, right beside the rotary reprimand, a vision of gallantry, a living steed fortugated during west-blown winds. Inside your head, where thoughts couldn't die if they tried to. Up beneath the third potted plant with accompanying upasal drip tech. They had somewhere to go, allegedly. Couldn't be fast enough. Or delzajated beyond recognition. They are caught aflame between the lighter and the material. Flammable fractitious fluke. They could finally fall silent. And the second piece I wrote, it's called Sunday. And I wrote this in February. And it's a part of a collection of photos and poems and performance scores called Slow Mania. And she remembered that freedom meant not reacting to the phantom aggression. Even though she was having a bad trip, a slight bit of weight lifted from her, which gave way to breath, to moans, and the scuffs of her platform boot. She had found pavement. The black of the club washed her of the week's sins. A celebration of absence cleansed her palms, selectively, and with patience. Marching in her dirt, waving at the 5:30 a.m. bus passengers on the way to their forever, she wondered if she'd eaten in the last 8 hours. Her elbows sweating on her new jacket. How'd she remember that? She laughs. Underneath the fanfare was a wonder, digesting the reality of her clumsiness and awe. She thought about calling him, letting him know where she was, but a chill ran up her spine, and she is quite superstitious after all. She's learned her lesson about not listening to the world's wisdom. So she ventured on up the avenue, checking her sleeve for any of that mid-Molly Ansel had given her before they left for Philly in August. She missed them deeply, mostly because they would have been the one to hold her hair and wipe her knees. She rarely indulged in loneliness, though. It was a specialty of hers, superseding her own discomfort. After watching her mother live life in fear of fear, the damage spells itself. She had invested far too much in the twinkle in her eye to let the fundamental fact of her aloneness strike her with surprise. He was recently into bemoaning about expectations, how she asked him to carry hers without considering the weight. She barely listened to his gripes until this moment, when she felt how heavy her expectations for herself were. It is an expensive deed projecting oneself onto one's own face all day, never once letting the truth get in front of her desires. It's been her project ever since to display some sense of emotional nudity in her everyday. Let the wind brush her nipples until they flirted with erection. It seemed to drive people fucking crazy. She didn't mind this casualty. She was usually on K when people decided they most hated her, And by that time, she was so cozy with her psyche that she forgot there were others involved. She remembered that inner aggression paralyzes phantom freedom, and that was something to add to her personality checklist. How to be me, a brilliant set of Scooby-Doo-esque reveals to employ in various social spaces. She had tried softness as a weapon, to no avail. She figured she would get hurt in the process, but she was very emotionally tethered to her morals at the time. It came naturally to her to surrender her comfort for the ease of others, so she was excited to try otherwise when the time came to gather the courage. It was around this time that she met him. He was into her bite, railing lines with her in awe of his own razor edge. He sharpened himself against her. Hey, a person on the avenue appears in front of her. They were missing a heel, and she thought it complicated to remark on this. I'm lost. Can you help me? No one had ever asked her for help in public. She figured she usually looked like the one who needed the help. At the novelty of the situation, she decided to let go of her annoyance at having her inner monologue interrupted to walk with them. They had a calming quality. Not that she needed calming, but it was welcome when she let it be. They asked a total of 7 questions on their walk, most of which were navigation-based. Though the sea between them wasn't swimmable, the waves were more amusing than devastating. Trite attempts at eye contact dissolved into the sunrise, and she was quickly intoxicated by the smell of coffee from the bodega by which they walked, the dick prints and the jogger's sweats, the moisture already collecting below a wig line, all of which, she assumed, went completely unnoticed by her walking partner, the mysterious new, or were clocked and promptly shelved for, hopefully, future navigation complications. Without hesitation, she stopped to release what's left of her stomach acid upon the pavement, and they stood fairly close to her, sending a haunting resolve running up her back. It filled her as she expunged, and a block later, when it was time to say goodbye, she remarked, "This is what love must feel like, a floating anvil." And the strangers shook their head and searched for their keys for about 3 minutes before they went inside. And the last one is from a performance score of mine called Untitled 1 through 5. That is being published this spring by Triple Press. And I'm going to read a little section of a section called Failure on Failure. It's going to be about 2 pages. It's kind of long, so I'm going to read a little short section. I failed to feed myself. I failed to convert to veganism. I failed to convert to vegetarianism. I failed to cut meat out of my diet because it tastes good, but I tell myself it's because I'm in desperate need of protein. I failed to cut dairy out of my diet because it tastes so good, but I tell myself it's because I'm in desperate need of vitamin D. I failed to cut honey out of my diet because it tastes like how 11 years old tastes, but I tell myself it's because it tastes like how 14-year-old tastes. I failed to cut bread out of my diet because it tastes like I need it to live. I failed to feed myself. I failed to remember to eat. I failed to breathe. I failed to remember to take a 5-second inhale and a 5-second exhale when I'm anxious. I failed to stop smoking cigarettes completely, but I'm close. I failed to stop ingesting nicotine. I failed to cut back on smoking weed. I failed to be scared of being arrested for smoking weed on the street. I failed to take my safety seriously. I failed to listen to my fear when necessary. I failed to treat my fear as a rational part of my emotional landscape. I failed to trust my emotional landscape. I failed to expand my emotional landscape. I failed to manifest destiny, my emotional landscape. I failed to farm my emotional landscape. I failed to till the soil of my emotional landscape. I failed to rotate crops on my emotional landscape. I failed to burn the earth of my emotional landscape. I failed to let people into my emotional landscape. I failed to let cows graze my emotional landscape because they would get lost. I failed to clean up the bird shit on my emotional landscape. I failed to spread the mulch on my emotional landscape. I used to know how to garden with my mother. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nazareth. And thank you, Oki, Derica, Nora. and Charles. And thanks everybody for being here this afternoon. I think we can do the thing where everybody's mics get unplugged or plugged in. I forget what you say. Oh, unmuted. So we can say hello and goodbye at the same time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much,
you,
That was
everyone.
wonderful.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles.
Hi, Maureen.
Hi.
Thanks, everyone. That was wonderful.